Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about my Leaguestarter for 3.27. This video will be all about the Kinetic blast of clustering Hierophant that I've played from day one up to right now. It is one of the most fun Leaguestarter builds I've ever played, and also the first Leaguestarter ever I've got to 100. Usually Leaguestarters are just a stepping stone for me that I play for like 4 to 5 days and then I respec, but this one just has so much scaling potential and was just such great clear speed, especially for the League mechanic, that I couldn't really get off of it that early. This skill didn't just get 13% more damage this patch, it also got buffed with a lot of indirect things, for example, bloodlines, or also the new rune graph that lets you fork without having to put in fork support. It also got an incredible stepping stone item with Foulborn Kikazaru, which gives you a ton of flat mana, which is what you're usually missing on early. And just in general, the progression curve is actually there that you can Leaguestarter with it, and it is a smooth experience. In this video, I'll go over how Kinetic Blast of Clustering works, how the AoEs overlap, and then I go through the progression curve of start to finish. I've also taken round about 10 snapshots of when I started at no divines up to like 150 to 200 divines investment. They will all be linked down below in my doc, but without further ado, let's just jump into it. But let's start with the pros and cons. This build has one of the best clear speeds in the game. That is a known fact about Wonders, but it is very much alongside Kinetic Blast in that fashion. It has crazy scaling potential in endgame because we are on hero. You can go Inquisitor late game with mana stacking. And believe it or not, you actually have decent defenses early on for a Wander, and then once you get blocked, it actually becomes pretty dang good. Obviously, Wanderers will never reach the defensive capabilities of some of these other builds because they need a lot of points on the passive tree and a lot of different gear to scale their damage, but you will not be falling over to everything. Then let's talk about cons. The single target damage early is not too great. It does become quite good late game though, but it is never like going to one-shot Ubers. So if you're looking for a build that just does Ubers, I would highly stay away from this one. This build is for people who want to absolutely blast through maps and the new League mechanic. It can also be squishy before you get blocked. While the max hit early on is not terrible, you don't have evasion or spell block or anything like that to protect from a horde of monsters. So while you're a ranged build, if you just jump into packs, you're just gonna die. This will be fixed later with block, but it is a little bit more expensive than, for example, on the Necro version of this build, where you get block up front on some of the other things later. Also, the skill can cause performance issues. I personally did not have this experience, but I know some people did. Mostly, if you see me blurry here though, it is not going to be my performance or my FPS. It is mostly going to be the bitrate. Let's talk about mechanics though. This skill has percentage of added physical damage equal to 18% of your maximum mana. That means that your weapon is mostly going to be a stat stick. As you can see on here, I have no physical damage, no elemental damage, no nothing. It is all provided by the gem itself. And it does take maximum mana, not maximum reserved, so you can reserve as much as you want theoretically. We don't really want to, but just FYI, 9229 times 0.18 on my level 21 gem. That means I currently get 1,661 flat physical just from the gem itself. Now, baseline, the skill only fires a single projectile, and it looks like this. Very unimpressive. You have to collide with something to actually make these explosions. So yeah, it doesn't really happen all that often. In maps, obviously indoors, it happens all the time. But what you have to do is you have to have a Spell Slinger with Tornado. Tornado means that you have something to collide with, and that's really all it does. But if you put it on the Spell Slinger and whenever you cast, this happens. So yeah, you're clear and your single target is kind of saved wholly by the skill. Another piece of the puzzle here is returning projectiles and fork. Now, the way we get forked this patch is actually this rune graph right here, which fires at most one projectile, but your skills chain one time and your projectiles fork. The fork part is the important one. Now, the downside is not relevant because if you look at the gem, it literally tells you that it fires a projectile, one, right? What the extra projectiles do is it adds additional explosions. So that will get converted. So you have a initial 4 additional explosions, and then you can also still get the +1 projectile here and +1 projectile here. And once we add returning projectile, it gets all a little bit even more silly. As you can see right here, my face will probably be blurry, but yeah. What happens here is pretty straightforward. You down here, shoot a projectile up top onto the tornado. The tornado gets hit, and now you have the fork, right? You have the normal projectiles. This is how normal fork works. And then you also have a projectile in the middle with split shot. It gives you 50% chance for an additional projectile. The small node does as well. So that means you have 75% chance that a third projectile will get added, and that one is always in the middle. Now, every time you hit a target, as we know, there are these explosions that will form around the target. It kind of looks like this, for example, if you have 6. This is the one that collides with the tornado, and all these yellow explosions will be around there. And then all these projectiles will go out, and if they hit any target, for example, let's say it hits the wall right here, then it will also create more AoEs around that target, and so on. And so you have that, and then you have also the returning projectiles that come back. And those will also overlap, and all of these can shotgun. However, do note that while this sounds impressive and looks impressive, returning projectile has a hefty 66% less damage with hits and ailments, so that is why often people overshoot the damage on their POBs. I, in general, just leave one projectile in or one explosion, and you can kind of figure out from there. It is very dependent on your positioning and also where the walls are and how big the hitbox of your enemy is. And positioning on bosses is extremely, extremely important. As you can see right here, the projectile needs to first fork out. Now, if you look at how these AoEs are distributed, there's always a blind spot in the middle because the AoEs spawn around the projectile that gets hit. And if I spawn a tornado right next to me, the AoEs are going to be like this. So if you're standing on top of the boss, you will be exactly in that dead zone, and all they will get hit by is a single projectile and maybe one AoE. However, if your boss is over there, it can nicely spread out, and as you can see, he will exactly get overlapped by a lot of these AoEs. Now, we've also had the addition of Wall of Force this patch, which a lot of people say is completely useless. On this build, I actually disagree. It is not crazy good, but it does add a little bit of extra burst. The reason it's better on this build is because a lot of our damage comes from these AoEs, and the wall only gets consumed once hit by 17 projectiles. We're not very projectile heavy, we're very AoE heavy, and those AoEs do not count towards bricking our Wall of Force. The problem is more that it's very skill intensive, because where do you want to put it? So you need to be already a little bit away from the boss, but then you don't want to put the wall right behind the boss, because then the AoEs are going to overlap far away. You want to actually have it like even further away, because then, as you can see right here, some of the AoEs will actually align here. So this is like a little bit of a feeling thing, but I can guarantee you, if you're struggling with single target damage and you work on this a little bit, you will have a lot better results. Next, we have to talk about Indigon, which is the most broken item and the big chase item, especially early on, that you want to get on this build to make your damage feel really good. What it basically does is it ramps up the cost of your skills to crazy levels at the extra gained spell damage that you get down below here, which has 25% increased spell damage for each 200 mana scaled. That goes up to 2000%, which Kinetic Blast of Clustering converts spell damage to attack damage at double ratio. So that is a total of 4000% increased damage. In order to show you how this ramp up works, I will quickly open a Strand Deli map, which is what I'm currently farming. Now, take a little bit of a peek at the mana. What is going to happen here is my Arcane Cloak is going to consume a ton of extra mana. Whenever this spends mana, it actually counts towards Indigon. And whenever that happens, immediately my attack ramps up. Because if you look at the attack on its own, 22 mana, I don't have the attack speed to ramp that up to like, what you need is 16,000 mana per 4 seconds, which is recently, but with the Arcane Cloak, it will actually happen pretty naturally. And I do have Instant Leech, and we do have a ton of hits, so what you will see is it's going to be actually pretty nice. So we're gonna quickly wait for the automation to come back up. You can see the Arcane Cloak just ramped up, and now my mana cost is pretty cracked. So I have 236. Right now I'm not spending too much. My Tornado is also ramping up, so now here it is, right? Now I have like 400 mana cost. It's gonna ramp to like 500, 600. Sometimes it goes up to 1,000. Also depends on what attack speed buffs you have, but with the Instant Leech, that is not a problem at all. As you can see, throughout maps and even on the boss, you're going to feel absolutely no problems at any point. Now, the problem comes when you don't have any targets to hit, or if there's only a single target that you can leech off. At that point, on Ubers, you want to have Lavianga Spirit. This flask is a little bit counterintuitive because you're not spending any mana, but it's only up, if I pressed it here, it's only up until I go back to full. And all it does is just balance out things a little bit. It alleviates a little bit of that mana stress. Don't get me wrong though, on bosses, you're not going to have the full perfect uptime. However, if we look at just how broken Indigon is, for example, in this very late setup that I can show you here, this is my damage per 1 AoE, 11.8k. I mean, they should be the same. Yeah, 11.8k. And then look at what happens when I turn off Indigon. So it roundabout times 7s, times 8s my damage. And so you can understand why, even though this can sometimes feel a little bit off and you have to do some fixing, it is just such a ridiculous item. And in order to facilitate this mana and this recovery, we need a few things. The first one is a high-level inspiration. This, once again, might sound counterintuitive with the less mana cost, but your mana cost will ramp up so incredibly fast that this makes it a lot more stable. You can also try it out without. I've heard people who have been doing fine without, so that's kind of onto you. Then we have chance to recover mana on attack. There is first this, this mana mastery right here, 10% chance to recover 10% of mana when you use the skill, and that is of your full mana. So no matter how much your wand attack costs, whenever this procs, you get back 922 mana. The same mod you can also get from a Watcher's Eye, which I think is up here. Yeah, so you can get up to 15% of that same mod, and they are additive with each other for a total of 25. So if you're wondering why I have a level 1 Clarity equipped, that is why. And obviously Instant Leech, which you get from the Mastery down here, that will be the biggest one. Now I will say that since they nerfed this from 10 to 5%, it has been a little bit more rowdy. So we have, in the past, I, for example, didn't have to do Inspiration, but I'm now at a point where it feels really nice. Do also note that Indigon will feel better and better the more mana you have. Early on, you will have around about 5 to 6k, and then you will ramp up and ramp up and ramp up. Let's talk about Ascendancy, which is a Hierophant. We have Divine Guidance, which makes it so we take an extra 10% from mana before life. That together with the Mind over Matter is a whopping 50%. You can also have another 10% on the Watcher's Eye up here, although remember that getting both of the bottom mods is quite expensive. We have Sanctuary of Thought, which gives us a 100% AoE boost, which is quite ridiculous for clear. We get 20% of maximum mana as extra ES, which is a nice defensive layer, especially in conjunction with Corrupted Soul. We then have Conviction of Power, which just straight up gives us 4 power charges, 4 endurance charges, no questions asked, just there. Very solid node. And then one of the biggest buffs this league for the skill was, after this, there's nothing really to take on a Hierophant. Now there is. Now we get Tigers. And this is what we get from the 5 Tigers, especially attack and cast speed is such a feel-good. It is good to know that this will stay in the game as a baseline. They are not leaving after this league. It's not just borrowed power. So yeah, on critical strike, you're summoning the Tigers, and it has like, from what I could glean, a 0.5 second internal cooldown. So it's going to be ramped up immediately, and just they get refreshed. You can look at the icons on the top left, and you will see that they're always up. You can get this Ascendancy by buying a Ferric Tiger Alpha and then beating the boss. He does hit quite hard, but it is decently a squishy encounter. For Pantheon, Soul of the Brine King is a big deal. This one gives us semi-stun immunity, but also chance to avoid being frozen. One of the biggest problems with this skill is that you have to reserve some of your mana, which means you cannot use Eternal Blessing. So you don't get a free Purity of Elements. And that means that you need to get your ailment immunity elsewhere. And the only one that is necessary as early as possible is Freeze Immune, right? Like that's the one. So you need to kill Mervel the Returned, and then you get Freeze Immune. You have the stun stuff. That is always going to stay here. Soul of the Brine King. And then Soul of Abaroth if you're doing Searing Exarch, and yeah, just fill in whatever content you're doing down here. But let's talk about one of our defensive cornerstones, which is Corrupted Soul. What this does is it lets through 50% of the damage that you take here from your ES to your life. And that means that once it goes through your life, it also gets split onto mana. And that split looks exactly like this. And what that lets us do is it lets us take advantage of all the different leech and all the different recovery at the same time. Because think about it, usually you would get hit down on your ES up to 0, and only then your life starts kicking in. So you can never really use both at the same time. So you don't really raise your max hit. With this gem though, you do. And on attack-based builds, you also even have mana leech. So this is like triple different leeches that get activated at the same time. So while you might not see this all in PoB because it just assumes that you can use all your ES, this is really what makes this build tick. I'll quickly show you an Abomination map to kind of give you a little bit of an impression of what this build looks like. So yeah, it's very chill. Now we do actually have some grafts here, Dance in the White and Grey Wind Howls, but yeah, I'm not going to use them too much. We also have a Sigil of Power, which I'm going to put down on single target, but otherwise I'm just going to be shield charging around. My Tornado is auto cast, and I'll be casting KB of Clustering. I'm just going to run here through real quickly, and I'm going to show you kind of the, I don't want to wade through this breach. I'm sure you can imagine how it looks like. There are Tentacle Fiends on this map, so let's see how that works out. But I'm going to show you the boss real quickly. So yeah, you just charge through, everything dies, and yeah, that is about it. Now, in terms of tier 17 content, I would highly recommend to not do Fortress because the boss kind of stands in the middle. It's a little bit annoying, especially if you don't have good gear. A-Bomb is quite a lot better because you have those walls around the boss. Most of the other ones are still fine, and with enough gear, you're still good. So you put down your wall behind it, and then you do this, right? Now, obviously, if an enemy is already against the wall, it's not going to make much of a difference, but as you can see right here, we're doing pretty well. I can look at the mods that are on here afterwards. Do note that I currently have a Svalin setup on. The only difference between this and a budget quote-unquote block setup would be that I'm on like 89% block. But as you can see, most things never really touch me. And yeah, it is quite easy. Like I said, the only content you don't really want to do is Ubers. You kind of can if you want to struggle through it, but it's just not made for that kind of content. The only things you shouldn't really do on this build is obviously reflect. Less chance to block is really bad. And then also in some content, if you have no leech, that one you will feel for sure. Now let's go over my gear. The wand, I already made a video about if you want to know how to craft a wand like this, but basically you want everything but spell damage. Indigon already gives you so much increased damage that it's a drop in the bucket, but you want all the other attack-based stats, so you want to get a kinetic wand for sure. Indigon already explained this is the most important item in the build, and once you have it, that's where the build really starts to pop off, and that's where it goes from serviceable to good to really good. Then we have Svalin, which I have a normal block version and a Svalin version because I know the shield's expensive. Both are worthwhile. The normal block one, it's not harder to get block. It is actually a little bit easier, and the difference will only be 75 or 87 block, right? Like that's basically the difference, but having a normal rare shield is definitely worth it. So check out that POB as well. Then we have necrotic armor. You shouldn't really go for an evasion base unless you're going to go mage blood and eventually going to go into a jade flask, because we don't really have a ton of access to evasion outside of it. But if you have mage blood and a jade flask with 60% evasion, then yeah, that's where it's going to start popping off kind of. I have it right here. I have my mage blood and then I have a jade flask like this. So at that point, you want to go for hybrid gear. Like I was going to go on the necrotic armor, but otherwise just go full ES. And as you will see everywhere, you want life, mana, and then resistances. Now, life is really important on a mana build still because it does dictate how much of your life will get swapped to mana. If you have 10,000 mana, but only 2,000 life, then, well, the damage taken as mana is still not gonna matter as much. So that is quite important. Then you have Warlock Boots. So like I said, ES bases, it doesn't make much of a difference because you're using most of your prefixes elsewhere anyways. You want to fix your accuracy, you want to fix your attack speed as much as you can on these, but there's not really anything crazy special here. My amulet is very advanced now. I have Eyes of the Great Wolf with crit multi and mana. And then we have Foulborn Kikazarus, which I'm still using. They're just so goddamn good. With 2 of these, you are curse immune straight up. You will also get some all attributes, a little bit of mana regen, res, but you get 2 max mana per level. And at this point, I'm at level 100, so I get flat 200 mana. And usually the highest you can get on a normal ring is around about 70. Now you can play around with mirrored rings, and that's probably what I would have done eventually. But yeah, I'm at the point where I'm not really investing into the build anymore, so you can look into that yourself if you want to. Belt for the showcase, I just put in a normal heavy belt where you just want mana, resistances, and life. However, the best belts for this build, as always, are Mage Blood, but also Headhunter. Headhunter is absolutely incredible for this build because our main damage deal has Fizz scaling, right? So that means that you're going to get a crazy damage boost from a ton of the Headhunter buffs that are usually dead on some other Wander skills. For Grafts, early on, Dance in the White is going to make a big difference. It's basically this tornado that you can put down, and whenever you attack and you crit near it, it will shoot out projectiles. This one is incredible, an absolute carry early on. But since it doesn't scale with your damage, at some point you're going to scale so hard that you barely notice it. So what you want at that point is you would probably rather have just maximum mana on your graft, because the mods down below matter more and more the stronger you get. And for Grey Wind Howls, I just have this one. Sometimes I get shocked, I get ignited, and then that gets removed, and I get a little bit of extra damage. For Flasks, Dying Sun is just in case you're mapping. It's cute. It's not a bad flask. You can also still use a life flask here if you're having problems against thoughts, especially early on. I do have a Bleeding Cannot Be Inflicted on my Kikazaru, which if you don't have that yet, then it's going to be a little bit rougher. Also, you want a Corrupted Blood on one of your jewels. I actually had this here. I don't have it anymore, but that is a big deal early on. Other than that, Diamond Flask, Reduced Effective Shock is pretty nice. Some crit chance, a Quartz Flask. Now, usually you see people have these tidy flasks, right? On your Quicksilver, you have move speed. On your Jade, you have evasion and whatnot. But those are the most expensive flasks, so you can actually save a lot of money if you shuffle them around. And then, yeah, my Jade, just a little bit of extra movement speed, so you can kind of arrange suffixes with bases as you can. Gem-wise, I have my main skill right here. Level 21 is actually quite strong. It does scale an extra 1%, so that's like 7% more damage. Inspiration as high as you can. You don't need to run this gem until you are Indigon, just to be clear. Physical to lightning support, if you get full conversion from your gloves, which is quite expensive to do, then you can cut this one for example, Sacred Wisps. One of the reasons I'm not using Sacred Wisps, by the way, is because they often don't hit the tornado, so they look a lot better in PoB than they actually are. Increased crit damage is just to get some extra damage. Returning proj is necessary, and then also Awakened added lightning at level 5. This one gives you lightning exposure. Big thing here, if you don't have this Runegraft on, you need to use Fork support, otherwise the build straight up doesn't work. Our movement skill is Shield Charge with Rage support, faster attacks and momentum, just for some extra speed. For the Spellslinger setup here, we have Tornado together with Spellslinger and Inspiration. A lot of these inspirations, like I said, are only necessary once you have Indigon to make it never, like, not proc. You never want to get into that situation. Then we have Arcane Cloak with more duration and automation. This one's just always up. Just make sure you tick it like you would an aura. You have Sniper's Mark with Mark on hit for some extra damage. There's not anything going on with the splits here because as Kinetic Blast of Clustering states, it cannot split, but it's just a ton of extra damage. Then we have Wall of Force, which is not always perfect and you have to place it really well. So yeah, use this at your own leisure. Some people say it's really good. Some people say it does nothing. So I think it's mostly a skill issue. I'm going to be honest. And Frostblink is just nice to get over small hurdles. Clarity and Precision. Clarity is only there for the Watcher's Eye, and Precision gives you a ton of extra accuracy. As for jewels, the most important one is the Glorious Vanity. Important little detail here, if you do not want to buy it and you just want to path normally, you can also path through here up top and not go for this whole spiel right here. It's going to save you a ton of points, and you can just use Replica Soul Tether. This will mean that you save a ton of points. And yeah, if you don't have Headhunter or Mage Blood, honestly, it's not a big deal either way. So yeah, that's going to free up a ton of small things for you, especially if you're lower level. Glorious Vanity here, very important to note here, is that you're actually touching a notable. And this notable, you'll want one of two things, either increased maximum mana, very strong of course, and then there's also a block node. You probably don't need spell block, but you might need normal attack block. So that's something you'll have to figure out for yourself on PoB. Also, don't underestimate the small nodes. For example, this is the node that caps my block currently. And you'll want one with Doriani, which means you'll get Corrupted Soul. Watcher's Eye is super important. Like I said, the chance to recover extra mana once you have Indigon. I have a Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh sub, which is very convenient if you want to go block. Just to be clear, if you can't afford these yet, I would still go for block and just get it as high as possible. Even if you just have 50, 60 block, that is still such a big deal. You'll definitely not regret it, but make sure you can cap it at some point. Then we have normal rare jewels. They would look like this. You would want Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you, and then as much attack speed or mana as you possibly can. And then I have a little bit of a cute combo down here with Unnatural Instinct and Light of Meaning. I want you to look at my Chaos Res. I'm currently on -27, but once I put both of these in, voila, I'm actually on 100. I'm actually over capped. That's how crazy this combo is. And that is because Unnatural Instinct allocates all these small passives, which then give me 4% Chaos Reds each, and all these other ones as well. As for the passive tree, do note that I have some tattoos here. Some of them fix my resistances, and some of the others give me increased attack block. I have this on almost all the strength nodes. And yeah, you can see the res tattoos right here. Down here, I have an Impossible Escape setup. This is the Impossible Escape right here. I can connect everything around acrobatics. And here I go multi-shot, chains for extra fork and split shot. Now, if you do not have this yet, you can check the other POBs. You will want to anoint split shot. That is straight up just what it is. And once you have this set up, you can now anoint Tempest Blast, whereas earlier on, you actually take all of these nodes. I only have one cluster jewel, and this one goes Scintillating Idea and Storm Drinker. You can put a third notable here if you want to, but I didn't really feel like it would change much. I would rather have the extra all attributes and int. The problem is there's no combination that makes it so Scintillating Idea and Stormbrinker are both in front. So at that point, any other notable would have been kind of weak. You can also go for stuff like Prismatic Heart if you want some res. Also note that I've currently have monsters cannot block your attacks in. This is only if you're farming Expedition, or you can also do this if you're farming tier 17s, of course, but otherwise you would just put another jewel here. As for leveling, this build starts off quite smooth. There's a lot of new skills that you can try out, especially Kinetic Fusillade, which I haven't really fully explored. So if you want to do that yourself, go ahead. But what I go for is for a normal Rolling Magma setup until level 34, at which point I start to go into Wander. The only thing that can really stop you early on is not having enough single target, which is why you have a Ballista setup with Kinetic Rain of Impact. Normal Kinetic Rain is okay, but Kinetic Rain of Impact is really where it begins, and it is very cheap at this point. And then for your main skill, you're going to use normal Power Siphon. About the campaign in general, though, I have a full video that I will link to down below where I explain everything. I also have the POB in my doc. What I will now talk about is the progression in general. The way I wanted to do it this time around is put all my snapshots of my characters that I had at every point into POB. I wanted to do this over just like these clean items because it shows you what I actually had. Now, this will mean that I will probably make mistakes along the way, but it also means that it is the actual progression. So you can tell me whether you like this or not. Important here, the Maxwell Planner is only, it's basically just Pobbin, but different. All you have to do is copy or open in Pob, just like you did on Pobbin. There is one thing here in 2 of the POBs where it doesn't show what I have connected to my Ballista Totem, which is Kinetic Rain of Impact, just so we're aware. In terms of progression stages, though, all you have to know is you start with leveling. The early Kinetic Blast of Clustering here that I had was this. Now, these are the Foulborn Kikazarus, which first were really cheap, then really expensive, and now they're back to very cheap. So if you want to start right now, all of these uniques are very inexpensive. Carnage Heart I only used because it was good attributes, and I needed attributes and some res. That is literally all it is. And Prism Weave, don't use this. You don't really need all that much flat damage, but it's all I had at that point. Doldri's Tenure gives you so much increased spell damage, though, that I would keep it for quite a while. So that's what you will see here, and you can just open that in POB if you want to. And all the early stages, the power... So after this, I swap into Power Siphon of Archmage over Kinetic Rain of Impact. These totem setups actually do make quite a bit of difference, especially because Power Siphon of the Archmage also has Culling Strike. So they will be like 30-ish, 40-ish% of your single target at this point. And here you can see I got an actual decent belt and I got an early wand. Now on an early wand, what you're looking for is a ton of spell damage as much as you can, crit chance, attack speed, and then mana. Those 4 modifiers as much as you can get. Obviously, this one is trash. You can probably get a 5-time, like a double as good one right now for 2C, but that is what we had early on. The crafting this league is out of this world, so don't underestimate what you can get if you just buy it from trade. Same goes for your shield, by the way. You want as much spell damage as possible. Once again, this goes back to the fact that Kinetic Blast of Clustering has that much conversion, right? 200% of the spell damage. So for example, the gloves, they give you 100% spell damage. That's 200% increased damage. And that just really adds up. Mind of the Council is just a placeholder until you get an Indigon. It is not that great. It's around about 30% more damage, gives you a little bit of extra mana, but it is very cheap and it's going to give you a damage boost. So definitely use it. 6 links in this patch are completely a joke. Now, Fork support has to be in there until you get the Rune Graft. The thing, though, is at this point, Rune Grafts were like 6 to 8 divines. That is why I didn't have it early. Now they're under a divine. So buy these one as soon as you possibly can. After this, I got a cluster jewel, as you can see right here. In this snapshot, I don't know what changed. I probably fixed my flasks. I got decent jewels with attack speed and mana. And I might have, yeah. So at this point, I got a decent weapon, which I also talked about in my update videos on how to craft something like this. Just so you know, at this point, you should not be multi-modding anymore. At this point, the market is flooded with good mana wands, and people are making them off the Breach Tree. Then we got the Indigon transition, which I already talked about in this video with the Watcher's Eye. And yeah, the tree always changes a little bit. We have this right here, which I think, at this point, I went Replica Soul Tether, and this is the normal block version. And honestly, I wish I had done this earlier. This is just an item I put in to replace Svalin because I already had a Svalin at this point. I wish I did this earlier, so if I would do anything different again, you might actually go block right alongside Indigon. It is quite easy. All you really have to do is path here to Safeguard, and then maybe 1 or 2 block tattoos, maybe as the Mountain Anoint down here. You'll be surprised how easy it is and how good it is to get some early block into the build. The Necro KB builds got that from the get-go. And I should have probably done that a little bit earlier. But other than that, yeah, block is definitely the way to go. And then at the end, there is the Svalin version. Sometimes these overlays are, well, the uniques are not showing. But this is the Svalin version. And that's kind of where I'm currently. The Mage Blood I only have because I dropped it. So there was really no reason to include it in this video. And yeah, that's about all I got for the progression. So with this in mind, this is kind of how your progression will go like. And after what I currently have, there is still more potential. But now we're Wartongue Mirror tier investment, which would be in stack next. And that's something where you just have to look on Peer Ninja or whatever. I have already taken this Leaguestarter quite a bit more than what I usually do. So yeah, if you want to stick with this build, there is infinite investment opportunity. But yeah, that's about it. I also have day 1 to day 5 updates where I go over a lot of details that are too much for this video. So if you want to look at that as well, that could give you some pointers. Either way though, I'm really happy with what they did this patch to wand skills. I definitely want to explore some of the new ones, for example, Kinetic Fusillade, but that's probably going to be League Start testing for next league. And like I said, if you want a build that is a good League Starter, but also can transition into infinite investment, this is going to be something for you. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. And since I still never slogan, see you next time.